Shut up. The words slammed into me like a punch to the gut. My boss, Leon Perry, leaned across the conference table, his face twisted with anger. The entire board went silent. I felt my cheeks burn as 20 pairs of eyes stared at me. I had been explaining the budget discrepancies I found, but Leon cut me off mid-sentence. My hands shook as I closed my laptop. The clicking sound echoed in the dead silence. I wanted to scream back at him. I wanted to defend myself. Instead, I sat there like a statue, feeling smaller than an ant. Leon's cold smile told me he enjoyed watching me crumble. He turned back to the board and continued his presentation as if nothing happened, as if I didn't exist. But something shifted inside me in that moment. The humiliation burned, but it also lit a fire. I made myself a promise right there in that glass-walled room. Leon Perry would regret the day he told me to shut up. I would make sure of it. I rushed to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall. My whole body was shaking, not from fear, but from pure rage. I pressed my back against the cold door and took deep breaths. The tears came fast and angry. I let them fall for exactly 2 minutes, then wiped my face clean. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone different. The old me would have quit. The old me would have run home crying, but staring back at me was someone who had finally hit rock bottom and was ready to dig her way back up. I fixed my makeup and straightened my shoulders. I walked back to my desk with a new mission. Leon thought he could crush me in front of everyone and get away with it. He was wrong. Dead wrong. I had been suspicious about those budget numbers for weeks. The consulting fees didn't add up. Now I had all the motivation I needed to dig deeper. I opened my computer and started a new folder. I named it Evidence. Back at my desk, I pulled up the financial reports that had gotten me in trouble. 4 different invoices, all for consulting services, all paid to something called Summit Advisory Group. Each payment was for exactly $47,000. The amounts were too specific to be random, but too round to be real consulting work. I Googled Summit Advisory Group. Nothing came up except a basic website with stock photos and generic business language. No real address, no employee names, no case studies. It looked like a fake company built in an afternoon. The invoices were all signed off by Leon personally. That was unusual. Anything over $20,000 needed board approval, but somehow these had slipped through. I downloaded copies of everything and saved them in my evidence folder. My phone buzzed with a text from my coworker Beth. "You okay?" That was brutal in there. I typed back that I was fine, but I wasn't fine. I was angry. And angry people get dangerous when they have nothing left to lose. I stayed late that night, digging through old project files. Our company's biggest success this year was a software tool called FlowTrack. It helped businesses manage their workflow and had made us millions. Leon took all the credit for discovering this revolutionary concept. But something about FlowTrack had always bothered me. The design looked familiar, like I'd seen it somewhere before. I spent hours searching through tech blogs and startup websites until I found it. A small company called ByteStream had launched almost the exact same product 8 months ago. ByteStream had been gaining traction when they suddenly went quiet. Their website now showed a generic, under construction message. Their social media stopped posting. Their founder, a brilliant programmer named Casey Williams, had vanished from the internet entirely. I found an old press release announcing ByteStream's partnership discussions with unnamed investors. The date matched exactly with one of Leon's mysterious consulting payments. My stomach dropped as the pieces started clicking together. Leon hadn't discovered anything. He had stolen it. The next morning, I arrived early and used my admin access to search our internal systems. In a buried folder marked Legal Discussions, I found email chains between Leon, our lawyers, and something called Phoenix Acquisitions, LLC. The emails were careful and vague, but the timeline was clear. ByteStream had been struggling financially. Leon's consulting payments had gone to Phoenix Acquisitions, which had then swooped in to buy ByteStream's assets for pennies on the dollar. Casey Williams had been forced to sell everything, including the rights to her software. But here was the smoking gun. Internal emails showed Leon had been planning this for months. He knew ByteStream was struggling before they did. He had insider information about their financial problems and used it to time his attack perfectly. I printed nothing, but I saved everything to an encrypted drive. My hands were trembling as I worked. This wasn't just unethical business practices. This was fraud. Possibly criminal fraud. And Leon had been stupid enough to leave a paper trail. I was holding dynamite, and I knew exactly where to light the fuse. During lunch, Beth pulled me aside in the break room. She looked around nervously before speaking. "You need to be careful," she whispered. "Leon's been asking questions about your computer access. He wants to know what files you've been looking at." My blood ran cold. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing, but Kara from IT mentioned you'd been running unusual searches. Leon's not stupid, Deborah. He knows you're digging." Beth grabbed my arm. "Remember what happened to Carlos when he questioned the marketing budget? One day he was here, the next day he was gone. No explanation." I remembered Carlos, a good accountant who had asked too many questions about advertising expenses. Leon had fired him for performance issues that had never existed before. Now I understood why Carlos had been targeted. He had probably stumbled onto the same thing I was discovering. "Thanks for the warning," I told Beth. That afternoon, I noticed Leon watching me from his office. Our eyes met through the glass wall, and he didn't look away. His stare was cold and calculating. He was definitely on to me. That evening, I met my friend Riley at a coffee shop far from the office. Riley worked in corporate law and knew how to spot financial crimes. I showed her everything I'd found, being careful not to use any names or company details. "This is textbook fraud," Riley said after reviewing the documents. "Someone used inside information to manipulate a smaller company into bankruptcy, then bought their assets cheap. It's like betting against a horse race when you know the jockey is going to throw the fight." She leaned closer. "But you need more than this. You need proof that the insider information was obtained illegally. Bank records, phone records, maybe recordings of conversations. Right now you have suspicious timing, but that's not enough for criminal charges." Riley was right. I had enough to raise questions, but not enough to destroy Leon. I needed something bigger, something undeniable. I thanked Riley and drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. Leon had gotten sloppy with the paper trail, but he wasn't completely stupid. The real evidence would be hidden deeper. I needed to find his personal communications, his private emails, maybe even recordings of his phone calls. The next day I volunteered to help set up for the quarterly board meeting. This gave me access to the executive conference room early in the morning. I arrived at 6 a.m. with coffee and pastries, playing the role of helpful employee perfectly. While arranging chairs, I noticed Leon's laptop bag on the table. He had a habit of arriving early and leaving his things while he got coffee from the executive kitchen. I had maybe 10 minutes before he returned. My heart pounded as I opened his laptop. It was password protected, but I knew Leon was lazy with security. I tried his birthday, his dog's name, his anniversary. Nothing worked. Then I remembered seeing him type his password once. It was Leon Wins 13. Of course it was. His email opened immediately. I scrolled through recent messages and found exactly what I needed. Personal emails between Leon and someone named Marcus Phoenix, the owner of Phoenix Acquisitions. They discussed Casey Williams by name, shared her company's private financial data, and planned their takeover strategy in detail. I photographed everything with my phone, then closed the laptop just as I heard footsteps in the hallway. Leon walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Early morning, Deborah?" he said, his voice friendly but his eyes suspicious. "Just wanted to make sure everything was perfect for the board meeting," I replied, arranging napkins with steady hands. Inside, my heart was beating like a drum. The photos on my phone contained enough evidence to destroy him, but I had to act normal. "That's very dedicated of you," Leon said, setting down his coffee and opening his laptop. I watched him check his emails, probably looking for any sign that someone had accessed his account. His password auto-filled, so he couldn't tell if anyone had logged in. "I should get back to my desk," I said casually. "Lots to prepare for today's presentation." Leon nodded absently, already absorbed in his emails. I walked out slowly, controlling every muscle to avoid running. Once I reached the bathroom, I locked the door and looked at the photos on my phone. Clear images of emails discussing illegal insider trading, fraud, and conspiracy to destroy a competitor. I finally had enough evidence to bring Leon down. The question was, what should I do with it? I spent the morning researching whistleblower protections and corporate fraud reporting. The SEC had systems for reporting financial crimes, but corporate retaliation against whistleblowers was common. I could report Leon and lose my job, or stay silent and let him continue stealing from other companies. During lunch, I called Casey Williams. I found her contact information on an old ByteStream press release. When she answered, her voice sounded tired and defeated. "Miss Williams, my name is Deborah Jenkins. I work for Pinnacle Solutions, and I think I know what happened to your company." There was a long silence. "Then who did you say you work for?" "Pinnacle Solutions. We launched a product called FlowTrack that looks exactly like your original software." Casey's voice turned sharp. "That's impossible. FlowTrack is my code. I spent 3 years developing that system. How did Pinnacle get it?" I explained what I discovered about Leon, Phoenix acquisitions, and the suspicious consulting payments. Casey listened without interrupting, but I could hear her breathing getting faster. "I knew something was wrong," she finally said. "The buyer knew too much about our internal problems, things we'd never made public." Casey agreed to meet me that evening at a diner outside the city. She brought a thick folder of documents and looked exhausted. "I've been trying to prove this for months," she said, sliding papers across the table. "But I'm just one person against a whole corporation." The documents she showed me were devastating. Original code comments with her name and timestamps proving FlowTrack was her creation. Internal ByteStream emails showing they'd never shared their financial problems publicly. Bank records showing Phoenix Acquisitions had paid exactly what ByteStream owed to creditors, down to the penny. "How could they know our exact debt amount?" Casey asked. "We never disclosed that information. Someone on the inside was feeding them details." I showed her the photos from Leon's laptop. Casey's eyes widened as she read the emails between Leon and Marcus Phoenix. "This is it," she whispered. "This proves they had inside information. This proves the whole thing was planned." We spent 2 hours building a timeline of the fraud. Leon had cultivated a relationship with someone inside ByteStream's accounting firm. That person had leaked confidential financial data, allowing Leon to time his attack perfectly. Casey looked at me with hope for the first time all evening. "What do we do now?" I knew we needed more evidence before going public. Corporate lawyers would tear apart anything less than perfect proof. "We need to catch Leon in the act," I told Casey. "He's probably still using this strategy against other companies." Casey nodded. "I've been monitoring startup acquisition news. 3 companies similar to ByteStream have been bought by Phoenix Acquisitions in the past 6 months. All of them had promising products that suddenly appeared in larger companies' portfolios." We researched the 3 companies, TechFlow, DataBridge, and CloudSync. All had been developing innovative software. All had been struggling financially when Phoenix Acquisitions swooped in. All had been bought for suspiciously low prices by Leon's shell company. He's running a whole operation, I realized. Find struggling startups, steal their trade secrets, force them into bankruptcy, then buy their assets cheap. It's brilliant and completely illegal. Casey pulled up her laptop. "I've been in touch with the other founders. They're all suspicious about their acquisitions, but none of them had proof, until now." I felt a surge of excitement. We weren't just exposing one crime. We were uncovering an entire criminal enterprise. Leon had been systematically destroying small companies and stealing their innovations. The next morning, I walked into work knowing everything was about to change. I had enough evidence to send Leon to prison, but I needed to be smart about how I used it. Corporate criminals had expensive lawyers and political connections. I needed to make my accusations stick. I spent the day acting completely normal while secretly coordinating with Casey and the other startup founders. We agreed to file complaints simultaneously with the SEC, FBI, and State Attorney General's office. Multiple investigations would be harder for Leon to manipulate or silence. Around 3 p.m., my computer screen flashed with an urgent email from Leon. "Please see me in my office immediately." My stomach dropped. Did he know what I'd discovered? Had someone seen me photographing his laptop? I walked to his office on shaky legs. Leon was sitting behind his desk with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Deborah, I've been thinking about our interaction in the board meeting yesterday. I may have been too harsh." This was unexpected. Leon never apologized for anything. I'd like to offer you a promotion, he continued. Senior analyst position, 20% raise, and you'd work directly with me on special projects. The offer was tempting, but I knew what he was really doing. This was a bribe. That's very generous, I said carefully. What kind of special projects? Leon leaned back in his chair. Acquisition research. Identifying promising startups that might be good investment opportunities. You'd work closely with some of our external consultants, including Phoenix Acquisitions. My blood turned to ice. He was trying to recruit me into his criminal operation. Either he was incredibly stupid, or he thought I was. That sounds interesting. Can I think about it over the weekend? Of course, Leon said. But I'll need an answer Monday morning. Opportunities like this don't wait around. I left his office feeling sick. Leon was so confident in his power that he was trying to make me his accomplice. He probably figured that if I was part of the operation, I'd be too guilty to expose him. Or maybe he planned to set me up as the fall guy if the scheme ever unraveled. Either way, I had to accelerate my timeline. Leon was getting more dangerous by the hour. That evening, I called Casey. We move tomorrow, I told her. Leon just tried to recruit me. He knows I'm onto something, and he's trying to control the situation. Are you ready for this? Casey asked. Once we file these complaints, there's no going back. Saturday morning, I sat in my apartment staring at 3 sealed envelopes. Each contained a complete fraud report with evidence, witness statements, and financial records. One was addressed to the SEC, one to the FBI, and one to the State Attorney General. My phone rang. Casey's voice was steady but nervous. The other founders are ready. We're all filing our complaints at the same time. Are you sure about this, Deborah? You could lose your job. Leon might come after you personally. I thought about that moment in the board meeting when Leon had humiliated me in front of everyone. I thought about Casey losing her life's work. I thought about all the other entrepreneurs who had been crushed by Leon's greed. I'm sure, I said, these companies deserve justice, and Leon deserves to pay for what he's done. We synchronized our watches. At exactly noon, all 4 of us would walk into federal buildings in our respective cities and file criminal complaints against Leon Perry and Phoenix Acquisitions. By tonight, investigators would be reviewing our evidence. I sealed the envelopes and drove to the federal building downtown. My hands were steady as I handed the complaint to the desk clerk. I'd like to report corporate fraud, I said. The clerk stamped my paperwork. Someone will contact you within 48 hours to schedule an interview. Monday morning felt like walking into a trap. I arrived at work early and found Leon's office door closed with voices inside. Through the glass, I could see him talking animatedly on the phone while pacing back and forth. His body language screamed panic. My computer had 17 missed emails from Leon, all marked urgent. The messages were increasingly frantic. Need to discuss your promotion immediately. Important developments in our acquisition strategy. Call me ASAP regardless of time. Around 10 a.m., Leon emerged from his office looking haggard. He spotted me at my desk and marched over. We need to talk, now. In his office, Leon closed the door and pulled the blinds. Deborah, I'm going to be direct. There are some regulatory inquiries about our acquisition practices. Nothing serious, just bureaucratic nonsense. But I need to know. Have you talked to anyone outside the company about our business strategies? I met his eyes steadily. What kind of regulatory inquiries? The SEC has some questions about Phoenix Acquisitions. Apparently someone filed a complaint claiming we engaged in insider trading. Leon's voice was carefully controlled, but sweat beaded on his forehead. That sounds serious, I said. It's nothing we can't handle. But if investigators start digging, they might misinterpret perfectly legal business relationships. I need to know if you've shared any confidential information with outsiders. I haven't shared any confidential company information, I said, which was technically true. Everything I'd shared with Casey was evidence of crimes, not legitimate business secrets. Leon studied my face. Good, because I'm going to need you to sign some additional confidentiality agreements. Legal wants to make sure all employees understand their obligations during regulatory reviews. He slid a thick document across his desk. I scanned the first few pages and felt my stomach drop. This wasn't a standard confidentiality agreement. It was a comprehensive gag order that would prevent me from cooperating with any government investigation. The document included clauses about protecting trade secrets, preventing disclosure of strategic information, and maintaining loyalty during external challenges. If I signed this, I would be legally prohibited from talking to SEC investigators. This seems pretty extensive, I said. Just standard legal protection, Leon replied. I need you to sign it today, non-negotiable. I pretended to read more carefully while my mind raced. Leon was clearly panicking about the SEC investigation. This document was designed to silence potential witnesses before they could testify. Can I take this to review with my personal attorney? I asked. Leon's mask slipped for just a moment. That won't be necessary. Our legal team has already reviewed everything. I'd still prefer to have my attorney look at it, I insisted. It's my standard practice for any legal document. Leon's jaw tightened. Deborah, I need this signed today. If you can't commit to protecting this company's interests, maybe the promotion isn't the right fit. The threat was clear. Sign the gag order or lose my job. But Leon didn't know I'd already filed my complaints. His intimidation tactics were 3 days too late. I understand, I said. Let me read through this one more time, and I'll get it back to you this afternoon. Leon nodded curtly. As I reached for the door handle, he spoke again. Deborah, I hope you understand how serious this situation is. Regulatory investigations can destroy careers. Even innocent people can get caught up in the fallout if they're not careful. I turned back to face him. Are you saying I should be careful about something specific? I'm saying loyalty is important. This company has been good to you. I'd hate to see you make any decisions you might regret. Walking back to my desk, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Leon wasn't just trying to silence me anymore. He was threatening me. The scared executive from this morning had been replaced by someone much more dangerous. I needed to accelerate my timeline again. I called the SEC investigator from my car during lunch. Agent Mitch had a gravelly voice and got straight to business. Miss Jenkins, we received your complaint. Very detailed evidence. We'd like to schedule a formal interview for tomorrow morning. That works, I said. But you should know that Leon Perry is pressuring employees to sign gag orders. He's trying to prevent people from cooperating with your investigation. Witness intimidation is a federal crime, Mitch said. Do you have documentation of these threats? I thought about the gag order still sitting on my desk. Yes, and I can get you recordings if needed. Bring everything to tomorrow's interview, and Miss Jenkins, be very careful. Corporate fraud cases like this can get ugly when the suspects feel cornered. After lunch, I returned to my desk and activated the voice recording app on my phone. If Leon wanted to threaten me again, I'd make sure there was evidence. Around 3 p.m., Leon approached my desk with a forced smile. Deborah, have you had a chance to review that document? Still going through it, I said, making sure my phone was positioned to capture audio. What's taking so long? It's fairly straightforward. Leon's smile was getting more strained by the minute. I want to make sure I understand all the implications. Leon leaned closer to my desk, lowering his voice. Let me be clear about the implications. This company has made you successful. Your career, your reputation, your future earnings all depend on Pinnacle's continued success. Cooperating with outside investigations would be career suicide. My phone was recording every word. Are you saying I shouldn't cooperate with legitimate government inquiries? I'm saying you should think very carefully about where your loyalties lie. Leon's voice had turned cold. People who betray this company tend to find themselves unemployable, permanently. Other employees were starting to notice our conversation. Beth was pretending to work while obviously listening. Even the usually oblivious intern was staring. That sounds like a threat, I said clearly. Leon straightened up, realizing he'd gone too far in public. It's not a threat. It's advice from someone who understands how this industry works. He walked away quickly, leaving me at my desk with a smoking gun recorded on my phone. Leon had just threatened me for cooperating with a federal investigation in front of witnesses while being recorded. I saved the audio file and emailed it to Agent Mitch immediately. Then I typed up my resignation letter. Tomorrow's SEC interview would be my last official act as a Pinnacle Solutions employee. That evening, I met with Casey at our usual diner. She looked excited for the first time since I'd known her. The FBI contacted me today. They want to interview all the startup founders this week. Your evidence is exactly what they needed to build a criminal case. Good, I said. Because Leon is getting desperate. He tried to intimidate me today, but I recorded the whole conversation. Casey's eyes widened. He threatened you? That's incredibly stupid. Desperate people make stupid mistakes. The SEC thinks they have enough evidence for criminal charges, not just civil penalties. We spent an hour planning for the next few days. Casey had hired a lawyer who specialized in corporate fraud cases. The other startup founders were coordinating their testimonies. The net was closing around Leon and his accomplices. What about you? Casey asked. Are you prepared for the backlash? Corporate executives like Leon don't go down quietly. I thought about my resignation letter, already written and ready to submit. I'm ready. Tomorrow I tell the SEC everything, turn in my resignation, and start looking for a new job. You might not need to look very hard, Casey said with a smile. The startups Leon destroyed are talking about forming a coalition. We're going to need someone who understands corporate fraud investigation. Interested? For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely excited about the future. Tuesday morning, I arrived at the federal building downtown for my SEC interview. Agent Mitch was a serious woman in her 50s who immediately put me at ease. Miss Jenkins, we've reviewed your complaint and supporting evidence. Very thorough work. The interview lasted 3 hours. I walked Mitch through the entire fraud scheme, from the suspicious consulting payments to the insider trading emails. I provided copies of all my evidence and played the recording of Leon's threats. This is exactly what we needed, Mitch said. Your evidence, combined with the testimonies from the startup founders, gives us a strong criminal case. We're coordinating with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. What happens next? I asked. We'll be executing search warrants on Pinnacle Solutions and Phoenix Acquisitions within the next 48 hours. Leon Perry and his accomplices will be arrested and charged with conspiracy, fraud, insider trading, and witness intimidation. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Leon's empire was about to collapse. We'll need you to keep this confidential until the arrests are made, Mitch continued. Can you continue working normally for the next 2 days? I handed her my resignation letter. I'd prefer to submit this immediately after our interview. Leon is getting increasingly unstable, and I don't think it's safe for me to continue working there. Mitch nodded. Given his threats yesterday, I think that's wise. I drove straight from the federal building to Pinnacle Solutions. Leon was in a meeting, so I left my resignation letter with his assistant and began packing my desk. Word spread quickly through the office that I was leaving. Beth approached my desk looking concerned. You're really quitting? What's going on? It's time for a change, I said, carefully packing my personal files. I couldn't tell her about the investigation, but she deserved some kind of warning. You might want to update your resume. Things could get rocky around here. Beth looked confused but nodded. Several other coworkers stopped by to say goodbye. Nobody seemed surprised that I was leaving after Leon's public humiliation in the board meeting. Around 4 p.m., Leon finally emerged from his meeting. He spotted my empty desk and marched over. Where's Deborah? She resigned, Beth said. Left about an hour ago. Leon's face turned red. He stormed into his office and slammed the door. Through the glass walls, I could see him frantically making phone calls. He had probably realized that my resignation, combined with the SEC investigation, meant his threats had backfired spectacularly. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Tomorrow, Agent Mitch would execute search warrants. Leon would be arrested, and justice would finally be served. Thursday morning, I was drinking coffee and reading the news when my phone rang. It was Casey, and she sounded breathless with excitement. Turn on Channel 7 News, she said. Right now. I grabbed the remote and switched to the local news station. A reporter was standing outside Pinnacle Solutions while FBI agents carried boxes of evidence to waiting trucks. The headline read, Local Tech Executive Arrested in Multi-Million-Dollar Fraud Scheme. The reporter was explaining that Leon Perry, CEO of Pinnacle Solutions, had been arrested on charges of conspiracy, fraud, insider trading, and witness intimidation. The investigation had uncovered a complex scheme to steal intellectual property from struggling startups. My phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "OMG, did you know this was coming? Leon got arrested this morning." I called Casey back. "How does it feel to watch him get perp-walked in handcuffs?" "Like justice," Casey said. "The FBI found evidence of at least 12 different companies that were targeted by Leon's scheme. This is going to be massive." The news report continued with interviews from law enforcement officials. Agent Mitch appeared on screen. This investigation uncovered a sophisticated criminal enterprise that systematically destroyed small businesses and stole their innovations. We expect additional arrests in the coming days. I smiled, remembering Leon's arrogant confidence just a week ago. His empire had crumbled in less than 72 hours. 6 months later, I was sitting in a federal courthouse watching Leon Perry get sentenced to 8 years in prison. He looked nothing like the confident executive who had told me to shut up in that board meeting. His expensive suit had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit, and his arrogance had been replaced by defeat. Casey squeezed my hand as the judge read the sentence. This defendant engaged in a systematic pattern of fraud that destroyed numerous small businesses and stole millions of dollars in intellectual property. The court sentences Mr. Perry to 96 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Leon's accomplices had all pleaded guilty and received shorter sentences. Phoenix Acquisitions had been dissolved, and its assets were being distributed to the victims of the fraud scheme. After the sentencing, Casey and I walked outside into the bright afternoon sunlight. "So what's next?" she asked. I smiled and pulled out a business card. Deborah Jenkins, Director of Corporate Investigations, Startup Justice Coalition. Casey and the other startup founders had created a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting small businesses from corporate fraud. My first case had been investigating another executive who was trying to copy Leon's playbook. "Next," I said, "we make sure this never happens to anyone else." As we walked down the courthouse steps, I thought about that moment in the board meeting when Leon had humiliated me in front of everyone. He had tried to silence me, but instead he had created his own worst enemy. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay quiet.